Hey everyone! In this video, I'm going to show you how I create low content book, such as a planner or a logbook, to upload to KDP. So I'm just going to do a real simple, basic example, just so you can see the basic mechanics that I do from creating the document, to saving as a PDF, to uploading it to KDP. So I'm going to show you the whole entire process. So to begin with, I'm in Word. But you really could start in any program that can save as a PDF. Now to begin with, you can see I have a brand new document in Word. By default, it's an 8.5 by 11 with 1-inch margins. Now if I want to change that, I can go to this Layout tab and select a different size. It has a bunch of the standard sizes built in, and I can also set my margins. Now if there's a size that you need that's not located here, go up to File, and then go to Page Setup. This will allow you to create a custom page size. So under Paper Size, select Manage Custom Sizes, and put in your custom paper size. Now, I'm going to add a new one, and I'm going to make a 6 by 9 page size. Now your page size, you have to remember, if you're going to have elements that bleed, that is, you have elements that go all the way to the edge of the page, for example, maybe a lined journal, you're going to want this paper size to include that bleed area. Now I'll include a link to KDP's guide on how much bleed and margins you need, because that'll vary just a little bit depending on your number of pages. So in this case, I'm not going to include bleed because I'm not going to have any bleeding elements. In fact, what I often do is I won't include bleed, and then if I have bleeding elements is I'll combine the bleeding pages with the non-bleeding pages in Adobe Acrobat later. So I'm going to create a normal 6 by 9. If I were to do bleed, it would be 6.125 by 9.5, but I'm not doing bleed. And then I'm going to click OK. Now you can see it's untitled, so if I go back to that Manage Custom Size and double click, I can give it a name. When I name a template, I always indicate whether it includes bleed or not. It just makes it easier for me to select later. So for example, I could duplicate that one and add bleed for a different journal where I might want to have bleed, and then rename that. So now I have two 6 by 9 templates ready to go. So in this case, I want no bleed, and I'll click OK. So it changed my page size. Now the default margins are 1 inch in Word, which really is too much in most cases, especially for low content books. Now you need to have a minimum margin of 0.25 to 0.325 depending on whether it's your gutter margin or not. So by default, I usually just use this narrow 0.5 margins because not only does it meet the KDP specifications, but it does add just a little bit of white space so your text isn't right up against the edge, and so it's a little easier to write on. Now on this first page, I might add the book title and a copyright notice, but I actually have some pre-made standard title pages for each of my different low content book sizes that have like my copyright and kind of the "this belongs to" page. You can also get them from other programs, like for example Tangent Templates has them, and it makes it just really easy to create those. So I actually just create the content separate from all of those extra end pages. So I'm going to go right ahead and create my mileage log. So in this case, I'm going to use a table. So I'm going to go to the Insert tab, insert a new table. Now I want a table that has a column for the date, the start location or mileage, the end location or mileage, and the total number of miles. Now I don't know how many rows are going to fit, so I'm just going to put a whole bunch in to start with. And I'm going to make sure that I format everything the way I want it first, and then I'll add the number of rows I need. So I'm going to add my column headers. Now for date doesn't need to be that wide, so I'm going to shrink it down a little bit. And total also doesn't need to be that wide, so I'll shrink that down. Now you can see though, now my start and end are just a little bit off. So what I'm going to do there is select those two columns, right click, and then distribute columns evenly. So now that'll make sure that my start and end columns are even though I changed the sizes on those. Now, if I were to put a full address in my start and my end, obviously if I'm writing by hand, this row isn't nearly big enough to write a start and end address in. So I want to make my rows a little bigger. So I'm going to select the rows that I have. Again, I'm going to right click and go to Table Properties. You can also find this under up here in the tabs if you go to Layout. And then you can change your height right here. So let's give it a 0.5 inch height and see what that looks like. That looks much better to write a start and end. So now you can see I need a few more columns here. So I'll select two, right click, and insert rows below. Now it'll insert however many I've copied. So see, 2 wasn't enough, so let's try adding 5 more. Now see, I went one too far, so I'll just delete one row. So for a logbook like this where you have a number being totaled, I like to leave a box at the bottom that's for the grand total for the entire page. So a total that wouldn't need a date, start, and end box. So you could merge these cells so you have one big box at the bottom, but I'm actually just going to change the border color so that the borders of these 3 cells is white. So the only remaining cell that will print at least will be this total box. So to do that, I'll go back to the table design. There's a couple different ways. I think in this case what I'm going to do is use the border painter. So I'm going to change the pen color to white, click my border painter, and then click on each border that I want to be white. Now if you have a lot of borders to do this to, it can be easier to select the borders you want to change and then change the border styles all at once. But in this case, I just have a couple that I could use the border painter on. So now that my borders are done, I'm going to unclick the border painter. So I'm back to a cursor. So now I can add a label in this cell. Select the text, and I want it to right align so that it looks like it goes with this cell over here. Now I also want it to kind of take up the whole box. So what I'm going to do is go back to Layout and change the alignment of the text to right aligned but in the center of the cell. And then just maybe increase it a little bit. And then my header as well, I might want to make those bigger, maybe bold them, make them stand out. You could also change the border color so it looks a little different. So for example, sometimes what I like to do is maybe just make it a little thicker width. So you can see I had the bottom border selected, so when I clicked that, it applied the style to all the border bottoms on that without having to use the border painter. So now I have a very basic mileage log, and so rather than having to copy and paste this onto a million pages in Word, what I'm going to do is save it as a PDF, and then now I'm going to use Adobe Acrobat to make multiple copies of the pages. So to save as a PDF, the only thing I have to do is go to File, Save As, and then select from the file format drop-down, PDF. Now, depending on which version of Word you're using, you might have an option under File that says to export as a PDF or to print as a PDF. And I have found that there are problems with the font not being embedded when you save that way. There are ways to re-embed the font when you open it in Acrobat, but the best way, and I have a video on how to embed fonts in a PDF, is to do the File, Save As, and then change the file format to PDF. And you want to make sure to keep Best for printing because ultimately your thing will be printed. Now, often when saving in Word, you'll get this error message that says your page size is different than your printer size, because when you're saving as a PDF, it's essentially using a virtual printer, so it gets confused. So you basically just always want to say yes, you want to continue printing, because you're not actually printing, you're saving it as a PDF. So I have this open in Adobe Acrobat, and the reason I do this is that with most of my low content books, I actually merge multiple different interior files. So for example, I have this mileage log, but I might also want to add notebook pages. And those notebook pages are going to have bleed. And so I'm going to merge them together, and then I'm going to increase the size of my non-bleed pages so that they all match. So to begin with, because this is a brand new interior, and I don't have a multi-page file set up yet, I'm going to go over here to Organize Pages so I can basically duplicate the pages. So because I have 2 pages already, I'm actually going to delete that one because it's blank. I'm going to select my page, and I'm going to actually just file and save this as another one. So my original is named mileage log, but I'm going to create, let's go for a 10-page mileage log for now. So I'll save this new one as 10x. So now what I need to do is I'm going to go Insert from File. I'm going to insert that single page, and I'm going to do this 10 times so that I have 10 versions of this page. Now you'll see, because I forgot to save that file after I deleted the page, I can actually just replace the blank one, and it does the same thing essentially as inserting. And notice I'm just clicking yes to all of the prompts. The other way you can do this is you can also insert blank pages for the number that you need, and then replace all of those. So those of you who use InDesign are probably going, oh, that's so slow, just use InDesign. And the reason I mention that is it is a lot easier to use a smart object in InDesign to do this type of duplication of pages. But InDesign has quite the learning curve, so we're going to start with Acrobat. So now that I have my 10 pages, I'm going to save my file by pressing Command S or Control S on a Windows computer. So now I have 10 different pages. So now I'm going to save this file again. And for future use, I'm just going to make a 100-page file now. So now that I've saved this as 100, what I can do is I'll click on any of the pages, insert from file, but this time I'm going to select that 10-page file. So now I only have to do it 10 times. So now that I've got the interior pages that I need, I might want to add some extras, like for example, make this a title page or a copyright page, or maybe add some notebook pages. So in this case, let's add a notebook page every other page so that it alternates with mileage logs, because maybe people want to write down things that they bought at those places that they drove to for business, or people they met with, or receipts that they got. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to insert from File, and I'm going to grab a file that I already have that has 100 notebook pages, and you can note in my file name it has bleed because the lines on the notebook pages go all the way to the edge. So now obviously they're not in order, so you'll have to manually rearrange them. So to do that, I basically unselect the first one, and then I'll keep unselecting one and just moving it after the next page. Now this kind of page rearranging does take time, but often you can recreate interior files that you can reuse over and over just by combining and rearranging them. So yes, it takes time to make a low content notebook, but the more complicated it is, I find, the more value it gives to a user, the more likely it is to sell. So don't disregard something just because it takes a long time to manually rearrange pages or create. The best books are going to take a while to create. Okay, so now I have a 100-page notebook that alternates the mileage log on the right side. So remember, odd page numbers are the right, and my notebook paper on the left. So this is what I want, so I can preview it by going to over back here to close. And then I like doing view, page display, two-page view, because that'll show you as a book. And then I also change page display to show a cover page, because in KDP your book will start with the first page on the right. So the first page in this case will be, should be a mileage log, yep. So now if I go to the second page, you can see my layout has the notebook on the left and the mileage log on the right. Now you can see, because I did not create the PDF in Word with bleed, that this page is smaller than my notebook pages. Now most of the time this isn't a problem. To be honest, you can just upload this to KDP. 90% of the time it'll fly right through, because they'll just enlarge the page to have that extra white space. But I like to make it all the same, just so that there really is no way it'll get hung up for not having the correct margins. So from here what I'll do is I'll go back to Organized Pages, go to More, Set Page Boxes, and I'm going to set my page to a custom width. So this is where I need to add that bleed. So because my final page is 6 by 9, my width needs to be 6.125, and my height needs to be 9.5. And I want to apply it to all my pages. Technically, it only needs to be applied to the odd ones, because that's where the mileage log is, but to be consistent, I'll do it on all of them. So now when I click close and go into read, you can see it's added extra white space, so my pages are all the same size. So now I want to save this as a new file. Again, using a descriptive name so I know the size of the book and what pages are included. So perhaps mileage log plus notebook, 100 pages, 6 by 9, bleed. That way if I come back to use it again months from now, I know exactly what the file has in it. So now my PDF is ready to upload to KDP. Now, if you're doing a lot of repeat layouts like this, so for example, I have the same layout repeated throughout the entire PDF, it might be easier to use a program, for example, like InDesign, where you can embed single pages and have them repeat throughout the document. You could also use a tool like Tangent Templates, where you could upload your custom PDF, add their own built-in templates like this notebook file, and then easily add repeated numbers of those layouts. So there are quicker ways to do this. And again, it requires investing both money and time into tools that you might not already use. So now that I have my interior file, I need a cover file. Now, because I do the same size notebooks over and over again, I create a template once in Photoshop and then I just reuse it. But to create those templates, I actually start at the KDP website on their cover template creator. And I'll link this in the description below. So basically you tell it the size of your book and the number of pages, and it gives you the correct sized image that you need for your cover. So again, in my case, it's a 6x9 notebook. And we added 100 pages. And I'm going to print it on white paper. So now it's downloaded this cover into a zip file. And if I open this zip file, you'll see there's a couple different files in here that you can use. So now in the zip folder, you can see it gives you both the PDF and the PNG file. Either of them will open in Photoshop, which is what I use to create my covers, but normally I use the PNG file. So now I'm going to go ahead and head over to Photoshop and open up that PNG. So here I have the PNG template file from KDP open in Photoshop. Now the first time that I do a new book size, I create a reusable template with all my setup pre-done. So I'll add the guidelines at the trim and the bleed area, and this will keep my content within the printable area and allow me to do things like center the text within the front cover or the back cover. I'll also add a logo on the back cover, and then I'll add some dummy text for the spine, the title, and the author, so that the next time I do a book this size, I can just open that template and half of it's already set for me. All I'll need to do is add the correct title, maybe change the background color and add an image, and I'll be all set to go. So the first thing I do is add guidelines. So to do this, go to View, New Guide, and I'm going to start with the vertical, so that's up and down. And I need to put a guideline at the trim area, which is indicated by the dotted line, and that's 0.125. And then I also want to put them at the bleed area, which is indicated by that reddish orange area. And it's an additional 0.125 from the trim area. So this first one is going to be 0.125. And then because it's an additional 0.125, the next one's going to be 0.25. And then I need to add the 6 inches of the cover from the trim line. So my next number is 6.125. Now for the spine width, each spine will differ depending on the number of pages in your book. So because this book indicates that it's a 0.23 inch spine, I'll add that to my last number. And then I'll continue adding the cover space and the trim space. So now you can see I have all my vertical guides set. Now they might look a little off from the dotted line on your template, but because I use the mathematical numbers rather than just clicking and dragging to align them, I know that my guidelines are precise according to what KDP is going to print, whereas the template can be a little bit off. So I recommend doing the actual mathematical numbers. So now I'm going to do my horizontal lines. So the same process, view, new guide, except I'm going to switch over to horizontal. And now that that's set, I'm going to go ahead and save my file. So now the next thing I want to do is add a background color. So on top of this layer, I'm going to go to Layer, New Fill Layer, Solid Color. And then I'm going to pick my color. So now you can see, even though this background color is covering my template, I still know where to align my content because I have those guidelines in place. I did forget one though, it looks like. So if I turn this to 50%, I can see I forgot this trim area here. So let's go ahead and add that guide back in. So now that I have all my guides correctly positioned, I'll turn the background back to 100%, and I'll add my title. So there's two different ways I can align it on the front page. I can click in the middle and then later use the selection tool to align it, or I can start on the printable area guideline here and click and drag to create a text box. And so now my text will automatically stay within the printable area. And if I change the alignment up here to center, it'll center within that front cover. I can adjust the size, the font, I can click and drag to move it up or down, and you'll notice the pink lines tell me when I'm staying centered within that printable area. I can also use my arrow keys to move up and down. And then now I need to add my author. So remember, KDP requires that both your title and your author be somewhere on your cover. Now your title has to be either on your front cover or your spine if your book is wide enough. Normally about 100 pages and above allows for a spine title. I have found that you can put your author on the back cover and it will still get accepted. So on some books, I'll have the title on the front and the publisher name, which is in my case the author name, with a logo on the back. So in this case, I'll keep the author on the front and the title on the front. If I want to do spine text, I'll add my spine text. And then do Command T or Control T on Windows to transform, and I can either click and drag until it goes vertical, or I can enter 90 degrees up here in the toolbar. Now again, because I have this printable area, I can select the spine. I want to get the full spine here. And then using the Move tool, I can center it vertically and horizontally. Now you can see because of my guidelines that the spine text is too big, so I need to reduce the font size. I can either do that through the font tool, or again I can do the transform tool. Hold down the Alt key and it'll shrink towards the center. Now in some cases, you have to be careful on which font you choose, because if KDP doesn't consider it readable, they'll reject your file and tell you to either remove the text or change it to one that is readable. So now if I turn my background color off, I can double check. So I can see that my font is still within that bleed area. So I'll change it just a little bit smaller. And then maybe change to font. So that's pretty readable, so KDP should allow that as my spine text, but they may not, so I'll get a rejection if they think it's too small. So now that I have my title on the cover and my author on the cover, my cover is all set to go. Now in most cases I'll also add some artwork, so maybe a background pattern or an illustration, depending on what type of book it is. But this meets the KDP requirements, so it's all set to go. So now what we have to do is save it as a PDF in order to upload it to KDP. So in Photoshop, go to File, Save As, give it a descriptive name, change the format to PDF, uncheck layers so that it flattens your PDF, and then you won't have any problems with fonts not being embedded or images not showing up. And then click Save. You often get this warning that says that the settings you're about to save in the Adobe PDF dialog can override the ones you just set. Just click OK. Uncheck all of these options and click Save PDF. And now I have both my interior and my cover ready to upload to KDP. So now I'm in my KDP dashboard on my bookshelf, and I'm going to click Add a Paperback. So now I need to set all the different paperback details for my book. Now keep in mind that your book title has to be exactly written on your cover. So because I put mileage log on my title, that's what I have to put here for book title. Now, however, you can have additional words on your book cover artwork that aren't in your book title, but every word on your book title has to be on either your cover or your spine. Now, your subtitle can be any words, even if they're not actually on your cover, but KDP does restrict the type of information you can put in your subtitle. They don't want you entering things like the size of the book or the number of the pages. And so if you're not sure what you can put, click this link up here that says Learn More about entering your title information. And they'll show you exactly what is and what is not allowed. So often what I'll do is I'll use this subtitle section to add niche keywords about my actual artwork. And so, for example, on my mileage log, if I had added a flower, I'll have my title be mileage log, but then maybe add, garden flower painting, depending on the type of artwork. In this case, it's just a teal blue notebook, so I'm just going to use that as my subtitle. Because I might have another mileage log that's maybe pink. Now, you don't have to do the series name. I find the series useful if you do have a collection of similar books. So for example, if you have a series of activity books for kids, you might want to come up with a unique series name so that when people search for it in Amazon, all of your books in that series will come up. So maybe I'm creating a set of logbooks for business owners. So let's call this series Business Logbooks. And this is the first book in the series. Now make sure to put some time and thought into your description for two different reasons. The first one is customer experience. You want to be able to describe your book in a way that is useful to your customer so that they know exactly what they're getting. This is especially useful because on mobile devices, the look inside feature is not available. So your customer would not know what the interior looks like before they buy it. So use this description area to write as much information as possible. Now what's nice is that it will take basic HTML tags. There's a couple different resources out there that will allow you to create a description using bullet lists and bolded text and other basic HTML formatting, and then copy and paste it into the description. But if you're familiar with HTML tags, you can just type them directly into this box. So for example, if I want a paragraph, I'll use the P tag. And then I might add a list of attributes. And then end with a paragraph about my company or brand. So once your description is ready, continue entering your information. So for publishing rights, if you created the interior, you're going to want to check I own the copyright and hold the necessary publishing rights. The only time you're going to select this as a public domain work is if your interior is public domain. So if you simply use a public domain art on your cover, that doesn't mean the work inside is public domain. And so you'll only use this if you're going to publish public domain interiors. So for example, if you take an old public domain story and rewrite it or annotate it or otherwise change it, you would then select this option. So now for keywords, there's a couple different options here. Most people recommend really maximizing the space and adding as many keywords here as possible. Now, KDP themselves says to use short phrases that make sense in each box. I've had success with both options. I had one notebook where I put just one phrase per box, and the phrase itself made sense standalone. And that book sold within an hour of publishing. I've had other books where I tried that method and it didn't sell, so I went back and added as many keywords as possible, and then the book sold. So I guess you just have to try different things. So for example, I'm just going to fill these with keywords. So for example, in each box I'll put as many relevant keywords as possible, trying to keep similar ones together. So for example, travel size is a phrase that someone might search for when looking for a mileage log, or they might search for one that fits in the glove department of the car. So you want to keep similar keywords together. Describe the interior, describe your cover, describe how the book might be used, who might use it, who might buy it as a gift. So try to put as much relevant keywords as possible. Now I say relevant because you don't want to add keywords that don't make sense with your book just to try and attract users, because you'll attract the wrong kind of users and then your book will start to fall down on the listing page because Amazon will see lots of people look at it but no one wants it. So make sure that all your keywords are relevant to what you are including in your book. So normally I'd fill out all these spots and then go to select my categories. So one question I often see is people asking, well, what categories do notebooks go in? What categories do logbooks go in? What categories do planners go in? Well, KDP doesn't really have categories for low content books. And so you want to select categories that are relevant to your niche. So think about who you're targeting. Think about what is on your cover. That will guide you to categories for your book. So for example, with this mileage book, I'm targeting business owners who need to record their mileage for tax purposes. So I'll probably go down here under business and economics and find some relevant categories. Like for example, bookkeeping. Someone who's looking into keeping their books might also need a mileage book. Maybe under entrepreneurship because I'm targeting entrepreneurs. Office equipment and supplies. Because it's related to taxes, I might put it under small taxes, small business taxation. So, but maybe I had a cover that had to do with animals. So my mileage book, maybe I make a mileage book with a dog on the cover. In that case, I might, select dogs as a category. So there is no set in stone categories for your book. You just need to make them whatever is relevant to the contents of your book and your cover. So this book is not adult content, even though it's intended for adults. What they mean is it doesn't contain inappropriate language or sexual situations or other adult content. So in this case, it's a no. If you select yes, your book will really be buried in, it won't show up in general search because it really has to be for people who are searching for adult themed content. And then save and continue. So now that I've entered my paperback details, I need to enter the content. So the first question is whether you're going to get a free ISBN from Amazon or use your own. Now for low content books and no content books, you're probably just always going to use the free ones from Amazon. However, if you're going to publish a more extensive workbook or a novel, you may want to buy your own ISBN so that you could have it published through other publishers in other formats. But for this one, I'm just going to have them assign me a free ISBN. I want our black and white interior with white paper. My book is 6x9, and it does include bleed because those notebook pages go all the way to the edge. Now for the paperback cover finish, you have two options, matte or glossy. I often use matte for my books because it has a really nice high quality finish that's kind of soft to the touch, and I've gotten really good reviews on it. My customers seem to enjoy the matte finish. However, I do occasionally use glossy, particularly with dark colored books because those tend to show the fingerprints really easily on the matte cover. I might also use glossy for a book like this mileage log because it's intended to travel in a car, and so the glossy will resist moisture. For example, if someone spills their coffee in the car, it can wipe right off the cover. So for travel books, kid books, and other ones that might go through a little bit more roughage, I'm going to go through glossy. So now for the manuscript, this is where you're going to upload that interior PDF. So I'll click Upload Paperback Manuscript, locate my PDF, Click Open. And while that's processing, I'll now upload the book cover. Now this first option is to use KDP's Cover Creator tool to upload your text and image to make a cover on the fly through KDP. I created mine in Photoshop, so mine's all set to go with the entire front, spine, and back. So I'm going to select Upload a Cover You Already Have, and then click Upload Your Cover File. Now, I did not add a barcode to my file, so I'm going to leave this unchecked. In most cases, you will, unless for some reason you're adding your own barcode. Now, the final step before I can price my book is to preview it to make sure everything is correct. So you'll start by launching the previewer. Now, this can take anywhere from a couple minutes to an hour, depending on how complex your book is, how long your book is, and sometimes just depending on how many people are uploading at once. In that case, sometimes it can actually take a couple hours or even a day in order for your book to be previewed. So don't assume that the amount of time it's taking is necessarily because there's problems with your book. It could just be the server's overloaded. So you'll see this spinning thing until it's ready. You can open a new tab and start uploading another book, or just minimize your window and go do something else. So now that my preview has launched, I need to make sure that the title on my book matches the title I entered here. And remember, if you don't have the title on the front cover, the title on your spine needs to match. So it doesn't matter that my spine doesn't match my front cover. I just need this title word for word somewhere on the front cover or the spine. It doesn't have to be both. And then I have to make sure my author name also matches. Make sure all of my images, if I had any, were within the print area. And then use the arrows to make sure that my pages are in the correct order. So I recommend going through at least a couple to make sure everything looks good. I can see my notebook pages are going all the way to the edge. My logbook is all the way within the printable area. Now you'll see my log here is a little closer to the spine, and so when someone opened it, this part would probably be a little hard to write in because it would be close to the spine. So I probably want to go back to my PDF and add a gutter margin. I have another video on how to do that. But basically what this does is it moves your content 0.125 inches from the spine towards the outside edge of the page so that it doesn't get sucked into the spine area. So otherwise everything looks good. It should be approved by KDP. So I'm going to click the Approve button. And then what that does is it basically says that, yep, I previewed it, looks good. And then at the bottom of the page, I'm going to click Save and Continue. And this is where I will set my price. So I'll set my base price here. And your price will depend largely on who your niche is, how complicated the book is, what people are willing to pay for it, and also what royalty you want. Now, we'd love to price all of our books at something like $20, but let's be real, people probably aren't going to pay that for a simple logbook or notebook. And so I find usually in the range for a logbook, something more like anywhere from $7.99 to $9.99 is a good price for a simple logbook. Possibly cheaper, depending on if it's, for example, a mileage logbook. There's lots out there, so I might have to do a lower price. So let's try $6.99. Now you can see that will give me a royalty of $2. Now if I want to, I can click this box for expanded distribution. Now what that means is that other publishers outside of Amazon who partner with Amazon could also sell this book. However, your royalty is lower, so you can see my expanded distribution royalty would only be 65 cents. It also means I have to have a higher minimum price. So if I wanted to do just Amazon, I could price it as low as $3.58. However, if I do expanded distribution, the minimum price is $5.38. So if you're doing kids' books and simple notebooks, you might not do expanded distribution because you want to price it lower. But I almost always do expanded distribution because even though the royalty's less, I'd rather have a 65-cent sale than no sale at all. And so I'll almost always do expanded distribution. Now here's where you can set your prices for different international marketplaces. Amazon automatically takes your price and calculates what the price would be on the other marketplaces based on the exchange rate. Sometimes I'll go through and make these also a 99-cent one just for that psychology aspect of it all. So I might change this to $5.99, $6.99. I always bump up Japan a little bit because they seem more willing to pay a little bit more for books, especially low content books. And then after all my prices are set, I will go ahead and click Publish Your Paperback Book. Now I'm not going to do that today because this one's obviously not one that I am ready to publish out there. It's kind of a dummy book. So what I can do now is I can just save this one as a draft and I can go back and make the changes that I want.
Thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments if there's anything else you need to know to be successful on your KDP journey.